What if I told you that Edgar Cayce, America's most documented psychic, discovered something so profound about sleep that it could completely shatter everything you believe about life, death, and the nature of your own soul? According to over 14,000 authenticated readings now archived at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, your soul doesn't just rest when you sleep. Edgar Cayce said it actually leaves your physical body and travels through spiritual dimensions that most people don't even know exist. But here's what makes this absolutely shocking. Edgar Cayce discovered that what your soul sees and experiences during these nightly journeys could hold the answers to your deepest questions, your unexplained health problems, and even the traumas you've carried across multiple lifetimes. In the next few minutes, I'm going to share 3 documented cases from Cayce's personal files that will fundamentally change how you understand your dreams forever. Have you ever woken up feeling like you've been somewhere else entirely? Like you've lived another life while your body was lying in bed? Edgar Cayce said that's because you actually have. According to his documented readings, your soul embarks on a spiritual journey every single night, visiting realms where deceased loved ones wait to communicate with you, where infinite wisdom is stored in cosmic libraries, and where beings of pure light can heal wounds that doctors say are incurable. But I need to warn you about something critical before we go further. Edgar Cayce discovered that not everyone's soul travels to the same places during sleep. Some souls ascend to dimensions of pure healing and divine revelation, while others become trapped in darker realms populated by entities that feed on fear and confusion. The difference comes down to one thing: spiritual preparation. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal isn't just fascinating spiritual theory. These are documented cases with names, dates, and outcomes that were recorded by Cayce's stenographer and verified by the people who experienced them. By the end, you'll know exactly how to prepare your soul for tonight's journey and why Edgar Cayce said this knowledge could be the most important thing you ever learn. Edgar Cayce's journey into the mysteries of sleep consciousness began in 1901 in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. This humble photographer discovered he could enter deep trance states and access what he called the universal consciousness. But according to reading 5754-1, conducted in 1931, Cayce uncovered the most startling truth of his entire career. Our souls don't remain in our bodies during sleep. They travel. Edgar Cayce said that when you fall into deep sleep, your soul literally separates from your physical form through what he called the silver cord. According to Cayce, this silver cord is a spiritual lifeline, an energetic tether that keeps your soul connected to your earthly body no matter how far it travels through the spiritual dimensions. This isn't fantasy or metaphor. Edgar Cayce discovered this through thousands of documented trance sessions where he observed and reported on the soul's nightly adventures with precise detail. But wait, because what Edgar Cayce discovered next changes everything. In reading 5754-2, he explained that your soul doesn't just wander randomly during sleep. According to Edgar Cayce, it visits 3 distinct spiritual dimensions, and each one serves a specific purpose for your soul's evolution. The dimension your soul reaches depends entirely on your spiritual state before sleep, your intentions, and what Cayce called your soul's level of attunement. Let me share a case that proves this isn't just spiritual theory. According to reading 2067-1, a businessman from Virginia came to Edgar Cayce in desperation. He'd lost his entire family fortune during the economic collapse and felt utterly hopeless. But then something extraordinary happened during his sleep. The man experienced what he thought was just a vivid dream where his deceased father appeared and gave him specific, detailed business advice about investments and partnerships. Most people would dismiss this as wishful thinking or the subconscious mind processing grief. But when this businessman consulted Edgar Cayce, the reading confirmed something astounding. Edgar Cayce said this wasn't imagination at all. According to Cayce's trance state observations, the man's soul had actually traveled to the first spiritual dimension during sleep and engaged in genuine soul-to-soul communication with his father's spirit. When the businessman followed the guidance he received, he didn't just recover his losses. He built an empire that sustained his family for generations. This documented case proves what Edgar Cayce discovered about the first dimension. But there are 2 more dimensions even more powerful, and what happens in the second one will absolutely blow your mind. Edgar Cayce called the first spiritual dimension the borderland. According to his documented readings, this is a realm where earthbound spirits and recently deceased souls reside, existing in a state between physical death and their next spiritual transition. Edgar Cayce said that during sleep, souls naturally gravitate toward this dimension, and this is where most communication with deceased loved ones actually occurs. But here's what makes this discovery so profound. According to Edgar Cayce, these encounters aren't symbolic dreams or your subconscious creating comforting images. They are actual meetings, real conversations happening between souls in a dimension that exists parallel to our physical world. Edgar Cayce discovered that the borderland operates under different laws than physical reality. Time doesn't function the same way, communication happens through direct thought transfer, and souls recognize each other instantly regardless of their physical appearance in life. The case I shared earlier about the businessman and his deceased father reveals something crucial that Edgar Cayce emphasized repeatedly. According to Cayce, your loved ones who have passed on aren't gone. They haven't disappeared into some unreachable void. Edgar Cayce said they remain accessible to your soul every single night during sleep, waiting in the borderland to offer guidance, comfort, and continued relationship. But Edgar Cayce discovered something even more shocking about this dimension. According to reading 5754-3, not everyone's soul successfully reaches even this first level. Souls that are burdened with intense fear, anger, or what Cayce called materialistic attachments remain trapped in what he described as the lower astral planes. These are shadowy regions populated by confused spirits who don't realize they've died, or worse, by entities that Edgar Cayce said actively seek to drain energy from traveling souls. This is why Edgar Cayce stressed spiritual preparation before sleep. According to his readings, your mental and emotional state in those final moments before you drift off literally determines which region of the borderland your soul can access. Souls focused on love, service, and spiritual growth naturally rise to the higher sections where benevolent spirits and deceased loved ones gather. But souls consumed by worry, resentment, or fear sink to lower vibrations where the experience becomes nightmarish rather than enlightening. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you fallen asleep while scrolling through disturbing news, replaying arguments in your mind, or consumed with anxiety about money and problems? According to Edgar Cayce, those mental states don't just affect your sleep quality. They determine whether your soul spends the night in communion with loving guides or trapped in lower dimensions experiencing what we call nightmares. But the borderland is only the first dimension. Edgar Cayce said that gifted souls can travel even further during deep sleep, reaching a place where every secret of the universe is stored and waiting to be accessed. According to Edgar Cayce, the second spiritual dimension contains something that sounds impossible, and that is the Akashic records. Edgar Cayce said these records are a cosmic library where every soul's experiences, thoughts, and actions throughout all lifetimes are permanently stored in what he called the universal consciousness. And here's what makes this discovery absolutely staggering. Edgar Cayce said that during deep sleep, your soul can actually access this library and retrieve information about your past lives, your soul's purpose, and even glimpses of potential futures. This isn't abstract mysticism. Let me share a documented case that proves the power of accessing this dimension. In 1944, according to reading 3124-1, a desperate mother came to Edgar Cayce seeking help for her young son who was dying from an incurable blood disorder. Doctors had given up. They told her to prepare for the worst. But that night, something miraculous happened during her sleep. The mother experienced what felt like the most vivid, real experience of her entire life. Edgar Cayce later confirmed she hadn't been dreaming in the ordinary sense. Her soul had actually traveled to the Akashic records. According to her testimony, she found herself standing in an infinite library, surrounded by crystalline light. A being that radiated pure love guided her to a specific book, and when she opened it, she saw detailed formulas for an herbal remedy written in symbols she somehow understood perfectly. When this mother woke up, she could remember every single ingredient, every measurement, every step of the preparation method with absolute clarity. She followed the instructions exactly as she'd received them during her soul's journey. Edgar Cayce said in reading 3124-1 that her soul had accessed ancient healing knowledge stored in the Akashic records. Within 3 weeks, her son began recovering. Within 2 months, his blood disorder was completely gone. The doctors called it spontaneous remission, but Edgar Cayce knew the truth: her soul had retrieved the cure from the cosmic library during sleep. According to Edgar Cayce, this dimension holds answers to questions that plague humanity. He said the Akashic records contain solutions to diseases we think are incurable, technologies we haven't discovered yet, and personal guidance about your soul's specific mission in this lifetime. But Edgar Cayce discovered that accessing this dimension requires more than just falling asleep. According to his readings, your soul must achieve a certain level of spiritual vibration, a state of consciousness that only comes through what he called soul attunement. Edgar Cayce said that souls focused on service, love, and spiritual evolution naturally vibrate at frequencies that allow access to the Akashic records during deep sleep. But most people never reach this dimension because their consciousness remains cluttered with earthly concerns and lower vibrations. Yet even the Akashic records aren't the highest dimension your soul can reach. Edgar Cayce discovered a third realm that only the most spiritually advanced souls can access, and what happens there will transform everything you thought possible. Edgar Cayce called the third dimension the realm of pure spirit. According to his documented readings, this is where souls commune directly with what he called the creative forces, what most spiritual traditions recognize as God consciousness itself. Edgar Cayce said that in this dimension, souls receive direct revelation, prophetic visions, and spiritual missions for their earthly incarnations. And here's what makes this absolutely incredible: Edgar Cayce experienced this dimension himself, and what he witnessed there proved eerily accurate. According to reading 294-131, on the night of October 19, 1935, Edgar Cayce's soul traveled to this highest spiritual dimension during deep sleep. He later described entering a state of consciousness so elevated that physical reality seemed like a distant shadow. In this realm of pure light and divine presence, Edgar Cayce said he witnessed future events unfolding with crystal clarity. He saw massive global conflict involving nations that weren't even enemies at the time. Edgar Cayce witnessed destruction sweeping across Europe, the rise of a dictator with a distinctive mustache whose very presence radiated darkness, and America being drawn into a war that would reshape civilization itself. Remember, this reading was documented in 1935, 4 full years before World War II began. Yet every single detail Edgar Cayce received during his soul's journey into divine consciousness proved terrifyingly accurate. But here's what Edgar Cayce emphasized that changes everything. According to his readings, this dimension of direct communion with divine consciousness isn't reserved exclusively for psychics or spiritual masters. Edgar Cayce said that every human soul has the potential to reach this level during sleep. The key is spiritual preparation and what he called living in alignment with your soul's highest purpose. According to Edgar Cayce, souls that dedicate their earthly lives to service, compassion, and spiritual growth naturally ascend to this dimension during deep sleep. There, they receive guidance, healing, and prophetic insight that filters back into their waking consciousness as intuition, sudden knowing, or profound dreams that feel more real than physical life. Edgar Cayce discovered that the 3 dimensions aren't separate locations but different levels of spiritual consciousness. Your soul's ability to reach each level depends entirely on your spiritual development, your intentions, and your preparation before sleep. But there's something critically important Edgar Cayce warned about that most people ignore, and it could mean the difference between spiritual awakening and genuine danger. In reading 294-136, Edgar Cayce issued a warning that shocked even his closest followers. According to Cayce, not all beings encountered during soul travel have your best interests at heart. Edgar Cayce said that just as there are helpful and harmful people in physical life, the spiritual dimensions contain both benevolent guides and entities that actively feed on fear, confusion, and spiritual energy. This is why Edgar Cayce stressed the absolute importance of spiritual protection before sleep. According to his documented readings, attempting soul travel or even allowing your consciousness to drift into sleep without proper protection leaves you vulnerable to what he called parasitic entities in the lower astral dimensions. Let me share a documented case that illustrates why this matters. According to reading 2072-10, a young man in 1938 became fascinated with astral projection and began practicing techniques he'd read about without any spiritual preparation. Within weeks, he was experiencing terrifying nightmares and feeling increasingly drained of life force. When he finally consulted Edgar Cayce in desperation, the reading revealed something disturbing. Edgar Cayce said the man's soul had become entangled with parasitic entities in the lower dimensions that were literally feeding on his spiritual energy every night. According to Cayce, these beings had attached themselves to the man's soul during unprotected sleep travel, and they were draining his vitality to sustain their own existence. Edgar Cayce provided specific prayers and visualization techniques to free this man's soul. He taught him to surround himself with what Cayce called the white light of Christ consciousness before sleep and to request protection from spiritual guides and guardian angels. According to the follow-up documentation, these practices successfully freed the man within days, and his health was completely restored. Edgar Cayce said this technique of spiritual protection isn't optional if you want to explore your soul's nightly journey safely. But when done correctly, the results can include physical healing that doctors call impossible. According to reading 3195-1, Edgar Cayce documented a case that proves your soul's nightly journeys can heal your physical body in miraculous ways. A woman named Martha suffered from a degenerative spinal condition that left her bedridden in constant pain. After learning Edgar Cayce's sleep preparation techniques, she began experiencing profound dreams where she found herself in a luminous healing temple surrounded by beings who worked on her spine with pure light energy. After 3 weeks of these nocturnal healing sessions, Martha's condition began improving dramatically. Edgar Cayce said her soul had been traveling to spiritual healing temples in the higher dimensions, and the healing her soul received there was manifesting in her physical body. Within 6 months, X-rays showed complete regeneration. She was healed. Tonight, before you sleep, Edgar Cayce said you should set a spiritual intention for your soul's journey. Surround yourself with protective white light. Request guidance to the highest dimension your soul can currently access. According to Edgar Cayce, your soul's nightly adventures await, and the wisdom he left behind has given you the map to navigate these sacred realms safely. The only question Edgar Cayce would ask you now is this: are you ready to discover what your soul actually sees while you sleep? Thank you so much for staying with me through this exploration. If you found value in today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might benefit from it.